You lock the door twice before you sleep. Not because you forgot the first time, but because something in you needs to be sure, needs to confirm, needs to feel that small, controlled sense of safety before the lights go out. And maybe that is not about the door at all. Maybe you lock that door the same way you lock yourself. Quietly, automatically, without even realizing you are doing it. You are the person who listens more than you speak in a room full of people. You watch the exits. You notice who laughs too loud, who agrees too quickly, who looks at their phone when someone else is talking. You collect information. You observe. You catalog. And when someone new enters your world and says, "You can trust me," something deep inside you does not soften. It tightens. Not because you are broken, not because you are cold, but because somewhere along the way, you learned something that most people spend their whole lives trying to unlearn. You learn that people leave. That promises are architecture built on sand. That the ones who say, "I will always be here," are often the first ones to disappear. And that lesson did not come from nowhere. This is not a video about how to trust people. This is not a checklist. This is an invitation to look at the person behind the locked door and understand, maybe for the first time, why they built it. Because the psychology of people who do not trust anyone is not a flaw in their character. It is a masterpiece of survival. Part 1. The architecture of suspicion. There is a term in psychology called hypervigilance. It is most commonly associated with trauma. Hypervigilance is a state of elevated alertness where the nervous system is perpetually scanning for threat, where the mind is always running a quiet background program asking, "Is this safe? Is this person safe? What do they want?" It feels like intuition. Sometimes it looks like wisdom, and occasionally it saves you. But here is the part nobody talks about. The same system that protects you from genuine threats also fires at everything else. A friend who cancels plans. A partner who takes too long to reply. Your nervous system does not distinguish. It activates the same armor. Neuroscientists call this amygdala sensitization. In people who have experienced repeated betrayal, this alarm system becomes recalibrated. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the unconscious part of the self that holds everything we cannot face, everything we decided was too dangerous to feel. Inside the shadow, there is often deep grief. Grief for the version of themselves that once believed, that once opened. You did not decide to stop trusting people. Trust decided to stop feeling safe. Part 2. Where it began. You were not born with walls. No child is. Childhood is construction. The way a child learns to relate to caregivers becomes the template for every relationship that follows. John Bowlby introduced attachment theory. There are 4 primary styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Avoidant attachment can look like strength. They do not chase. They become self-sufficient. They are fine alone, they say. But the reason is, they learned that needing people was dangerous. So they stopped reaching until it became identity. Disorganized attachment is formed when the caregiver is both love and fear. The child faces an impossible neurological problem. These adults desperately want connection and simultaneously feel it will destroy them. They pull close and then panic. Part 3. The masks we wear to stay safe. The person who does not trust anyone is often the most socially skilled. You have spent years learning to read between the lines, to sense the shift in energy, to catalog micro-expressions. You know how to perform warmth without feeling it. You know how to ask the right questions, offer just enough of yourself to seem open, while keeping the real geography of your inner world completely hidden. You know how to make people feel seen and heard, because you have been studying people your entire life. Jung called this the persona, the social mask, the constructed identity that mediates between the inner world and the outer world. Everyone has one, but for you, the persona is a fortress. And the fortress has a very specific design. On the outside, it looks like warmth, competence, and self-sufficiency. It looks like the person who always has their life together, who is endlessly supportive, but never quite lets anyone support them in return, who is wonderful in a crisis and strangely unreachable in ordinary tenderness. On the inside, it is something entirely different. It is a person in a constant low-grade state of alertness. A person who is always, on some level, waiting for the betrayal, waiting for the moment the other shoe drops. Because in your experience, people always want something. There is a psychological concept called object constancy. It is the ability to maintain a stable, positive emotional connection to another person. But when your attachment architecture was built in conditions of unpredictability, object constancy becomes fragile, sometimes impossible. Your nervous system learned that the person who feels safe today may not be safe tomorrow, so you never fully relax. Part 4. The inner chaos nobody sees. The person who trusts no one is often the person who wanted to trust more than anyone. The depth of the wall is a measurement of the original desire for connection. You do not build a fortress around something you do not value. And what you are keeping safe is your capacity to love. Because it is still there, it did not leave. It went underground. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from living in perpetual vigilance. It is a deep, cellular fatigue. In the silence of 3 a.m., when the armor is too heavy to wear, something surfaces, something honest. A quiet, persistent ache. Psychologists call this the core wound, the underlying belief that if people really knew me, they would leave. Part 5. The weapons that became wounds. Your self-sufficiency. The world rewards it. But the truth is more complicated. Your self-sufficiency began as a solution to a problem. The problem was people, specifically, the unreliability of people. You became the solution to your own problem. You learned to need less, to ask for less, to expect less. The skill that saves you at 7 can suffocate you at 37. The part of you that learned not to need people also never learned to let them in. It costs intimacy. It costs the experience of being loved for the complex, sometimes contradictory person that you actually are. The body keeps the score. The experience lives in your nervous system, in the reflex to pull back at the exact moment connection is offered. Your distrust is not in your mind. It is in your body. And the body is not cynical. It is not calculating. It is simply remembering. Part 6. The shadow traits. Now, we go somewhere that requires a particular kind of courage to look at clearly. Because if you do not trust anyone, there are behaviors that grow in the shadow of that distrust. Behaviors that are not proud of themselves. That know they are not entirely fair, but that emerge anyway. Because they are the natural expression of a nervous system that is always preparing for betrayal. Testing. You test people, not with cruelty, not with intention, but with the quiet, constant architecture of small experiments. You create situations, sometimes unconsciously, that are designed to reveal what a person will do when the conditions are not ideal, when you are difficult, when you cancel, when you are less than your best self. You watch for the reaction, and you are cataloging it. Always cataloging it, updating the internal file you keep on everyone you know. Projection. Because you expect people to deceive you, you sometimes see deception where it does not exist. You read neutral actions through a lens of suspicion and assign intention to behavior that was simply imperfect. A friend who forgot to check in becomes a friend who chose not to check in. A partner who seems distracted becomes a partner with something to hide. The line between intuition and projection is one of the most difficult lines to locate inside yourself. Emotional withdrawal. When something feels threatening, you do not fight. You go quiet. You go internal. You become polite in a way that is colder than anger. You create distance with such efficiency that the other person often does not realize what has happened until they find themselves outside a door they cannot see. And control. When you cannot trust people, you compensate by controlling circumstances, your environment, your schedule. You are deeply uncomfortable with the unpredictable, with the spontaneous, with the version of life that requires reliance on others. Because in your experience, the part that belongs to another person is the part most likely to fail. Now here is what matters. None of these traits are character flaws. They are adaptations. Every single one of them made sense in the context in which they were formed. The withdrawal makes sense when showing emotion made you a target. The control makes sense when chaos was the primary language. The problem is not that you developed these responses. The problem is they are still running in contexts that no longer require them. Part 7. the rare and difficult truth. There is something that nobody tells people who struggle to trust. You cannot logic your way out of this. The distrust does not live in the rational mind. The nervous system is not listening to logic. It is listening to pattern. It was written in sensation, in the particular quality of silence in a house when something was wrong. This is why healing is less about changing your mind and more about changing the conditions under which your nervous system learns. It happens in relationship. The wound was made in relationship. The healing can only happen in relationship, something that requires the specific and terrifying act of allowing yourself to need someone. And sometimes they will not. That is not proof that trust is impossible. That is the ordinary human experience of loving imperfect people. Expanding your window of tolerance is the gradual process of allowing vulnerability and discovering the catastrophe did not arrive. Part 8. The gift inside the wound. This watchful way of moving through the world produces something ordinary ease never could. Depth. They notice what nobody else says. They feel the undercurrent. They can sit with another person in their worst moment. There is a concept in Jungian psychology called the wounded healer. The idea that the deepest capacity for empathy comes not from the absence of pain, but from its presence. That the person who has been most broken by betrayal is also most capable of understanding and holding the pain of others. Your distrust made you perceptive in ways that are genuinely rare. Your vigilance made you honest in ways that most people avoid. Your self-sufficiency made you capable in ways that others admire without understanding the cost. These are not incidental. They are the wound's other side. The question is not whether the wound was worth it. It was not. No child should build a fortress to survive those who should love them. That is not a gift. That is an injustice. But the person who was forged inside that injustice is extraordinary. And the extraordinary person deserves to know that the armor that saved them does not have to be a permanent residence. It can become, instead, something they can choose. Something they can put down on the nights when the person beside them has earned it. Part 9. The final realization. Here is the mental shift. The one that holds everything else. You have spent a long time thinking your inability to trust is a problem with your perception. That you see too much threat. But what if the problem is not your perception? What if the problem is your definition of safety? Somewhere inside is a belief that safety means certainty. That vulnerability is only acceptable once risk has been eliminated. But risk cannot be eliminated. Every relationship is a gamble. Every act of love is an act of courage. The currency is willingness. The willingness to be seen before you are sure it is safe. To need someone before they stay. Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. You have carried more chaos than most." The only thing between you and connection is the belief that the version behind the armor is wrong, that you are too damaged. That person is exactly who someone has been waiting to meet. You are not broken. You are not permanently sealed. The door does not need to swing wide open tonight. Just a fraction, just enough to let the light through. Which part of this sat heaviest? Tell me in the comments, because whatever hit the hardest is where the real work begins.